Oh, don't worry about that. I know. He said, you know what? We have to say a mass in your house. But for that we need the permission of the bishop. And that'll take a while to get. I said, how long does it take? He says, I don't know, a week, 2 weeks. But don't worry, I already have it. Took out a letter from the Bishop of Cape Town, signed approximately 2 weeks before I went to him, to say that Mass in my house. Well, how would you feel about that? Would you feel a bit freaky? Huh? I felt a little bit freaky. Came to my house, did his hocus pocus, made his magic water, put it on the windows. When he came into my son's house, something unseen grabbed him. Now this is not conjecture. This is not some stupid story. This is fact. Grabbed him, threw him around in the room that I thought the old man was going to die. And when that was over, and he finished whatever he was doing in the home, gave us his ordination cross, said, put that above the child's bed, left, problem gone. Gone. Now what do you do with that? You're an atheist. You don't believe in God. But here your problem is suddenly solved. Now what you're going to do? You'll have to admit that if you don't do anything, then you become as bad a hypocrite as those who pretend to do it and don't do it and do it anyway while they're not doing it. Is that right? So I went back to church. And I became a good Roman Catholic. And I said my 10 Hail Marys and my 1 Our Father, and I 10 Hail Marys and my 1 Our Father, and I 10 Hail Marys and my 1 Our Father, and so it's on and on. I had a great relationship with God, repeating myself over and over and over, and I felt nothing. Nothing. No connection. And one day, a young girl got up in my medical class, and she said, I don't believe what you are saying, because I was speaking on evolution. And I castigated her. I mocked her. I flattened her with science. And I ridiculed her. I told this yesterday already, and she sat down and she cried. And I said to myself, good. That'll teach you a lesson to stand up in my class and question the evolutionary paradigm. But then I had a guilty conscience. And like every good Catholic, when he has a guilty conscience, what does he do? Thank you. He goes to confession. But the priest was incredibly unreasonable. He had been shopping, so he wasn't there. That's very unreasonable. So I had to wait in the church. And I sat there in the church, and I looked at the little red light. Now, those of you who come from a Catholic background, anybody here from a Catholic background? Do you know what that means, the little red light? You don't? You don't remember? Well, no. No, when that little, if you go into the altar and there's a little red light burning on the altar, a candle with a red exterior, then you know that the consecrated host is in the chalice. That's what it means. Now, the consecrated host is the transubstantive body of Christ. Is that right? It's God in the flesh. But it's the God of the crucifixion. He's dead. It's his body. So I tried talking to it, and then I started thinking about this as I was sitting in this church, and I realized I was speaking to a corpse. And there was no two-way communication because corpses don't communicate. Have you noticed that? And I thought about this for a while, and then I said to myself, you know what? This whole religion thing is a whole load of hogwash. And this priest is not coming, and it's good because I don't need him anymore. I'm out of here. But I made a big mistake. Actually, it wasn't a mistake. It was the greatest thing I ever did in my life. Before I left that little church, I said, God, if you exist, show yourself to me. And I left. Never to go back to the church again. That was my intention. Now, can you imagine that? I'll backtrack a little bit. At the time, when we had this crisis in our house, just after the crisis, I had an Adventist carpenter come and renovate my kitchen. But I didn't know he was an Adventist. He was just a carpenter. He was a German cabinet maker. And I said, modify my kitchen. Make it a reasonable kitchen. That's what he did. But as he walked in, these Adventists, they are a pain in the neck. As he walked in, he said, I walk with the Lord Jesus Christ. Do you mind if I tell you something about him? Phew. I said to him, you walk with your Jesus Christ, but I want a kitchen. Give me a kitchen and leave me alone with your Jesus Christ. And he said, okay. And he gave me the kitchen. But he said, would you take this, please? And he gave me a pamphlet. And that pamphlet lay in a drawer for 1 year. Now, I've just said that prayer in that Catholic church, and I go home, and I look for something, and I can't find it. Fortunately, for emergency situations like that, the Lord gave us wives. Right? They know where everything is. They're absolutely irritating when it comes to something like that. So I asked her, where is it? And she said, it's in that drawer under that book. Yeah, there it was. But as I looked in this drawer, I pick up this pamphlet. I said, where's this thing come from? And I remembered this freaky guy who was walking with his Lord. And I read it. And it was a pamphlet that said nothing other than that the commandments had been changed. That's it. Had the Bible commandments in the middle, the Lutheran commandments on the left, and the Catholic commandments on the right, and it said, had been changed. And so I called this man over, and he came to my house, and I said to him, what's this? I called him after a year. I said, you remember you put a kitchen? He says, yes, I remember. I said, get yourself over here. And he got himself over there. And we discussed. And we went through Daniel and we went through Revelation in 2 days. Right through the night. We just sat and we went through it and we went through it and we went through it. And we discussed Daniel chapter 7, the little horn. I don't know what they teach you here, but the little horn is Roman Catholicism. Whether they teach it here or not, it's Roman Catholicism. All the parameters are there. Now, that totally freaked me out. Because what about this priest who was in my house? And he cleared up all of this issue. And you know what? As I was grappling with these things, after a whole year, this same priest phones me. And he says to me, you are in big danger. Out of the blue, no contact with this man. Live miles from him. For a year I hadn't seen him. You are in big danger. You get back to the church immediately. I hadn't even told anyone that I was leaving, right? This is all within a short space of time. I said, what do you mean? He says, your father is suffering on your behalf. My father was dead. I said to him, how do you know my father is suffering on my behalf? And he said, your father is suffering in purgatory because you are not doing what is right. You must get back to the church. Unfortunately for this Roman Catholic pastor, I had just done the study on the state of the dead. And my problem with the false theology of hell was also resolved. But I played along with him, and I said to him, how do you know that my father is suffering on the other side in purgatory as a consequence of me? And he said the nuns told him. That piqued me. I said, the nuns told you. How do they know? The spirits told them. Now that's fascinating. So that Roman Catholic priest who came to my house knew ahead of time what was going on in my house because the spirits told him. Is this all chance? Or do you think this is some spectacular design? I think this is some spectacular intervention of God in a person's life. Make a long story short, I eventually did get to know the God of the Bible, who was very, very different to the God of theology. And I could happily discard the God of theology in a waste paper basket where he belonged, and embrace the God of the Bible, who was totally different. But I had a problem. These commandments had been changed. And one of them in particular, the fourth commandment. And the fourth commandment says, remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. 6 days shall you labor and do all your work. But the seventh commandment, or the seventh day, is the Sabbath of the Lord your God. On it you shall not do any work, neither you nor your sons, your daughters, your maidservant, your manservant, your ox, your donkey. For in 6 days the Lord made the heavens, the sea, and all that in them is, and he rested on the seventh day. Therefore the Lord commanded you to keep the seventh day. Pathetic. That's the most pathetic commandment in the whole of the Bible. How can you have such a pathetic commandment? How can you keep one day to commemorate 6 days that never happened? Right? So I said to this carpenter, this is pathetic. I cannot keep the Sabbath day for 6 days. There are no 6 days. There are millions of years. And it's a long, long, long process that brought this about. He said, no, you're wrong. This man's a carpenter. And I'm a zoologist. So I argued with him and frustrated him beyond measure. And so he said he'll bring me some books. So he went and brought me some books. And I read them. And I gave them back to him. And I said to him, I've never read such drivel in all my life. So he was a bit taken aback, but he was stubborn. He said, I'll bring you some more. And he brought me some more books, which I also gave back to him. And I said, I've never read such drivel in all my life. And I argued with him about evolution, and I used all my whatever I had, and I threw it at him. And he got so frustrated that he got up and he said, screaming at me, he says, you know what? I don't have a problem with evolution. You have a problem with evolution. You solve it. Goodbye. That was a very sound argument. Because it squarely put the ball in whose court? In my court. Okay. So I'm grappling with this. I'll tell you a couple of stories. You'll think I'm weird. Who cares? Everybody thinks I'm weird anyway. I'll tell you a couple of stories of an occult world out there where people say, oh, conspiracy theories, cool, conspiracy theories. Have you heard that before? No, it's conspiracy ignorance, but never mind. Leave it at that. In all this grappling and all this thinking, I'm saying to myself now, all of these things happening in my house, so there obviously is evil. If there is evil, then there must also be good.